Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark. And in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Ashley Tate. From the world of Hollywood comes one of the funniest holiday movies of all time, with a youngster in the midst of a crisis, fighting to protect his home from two burglars who not only want to steal, but also want to punish him for the traps he sets for them along the way. We're talking about Home Alone. Home Alone was directed by Chris Columbus and was written and produced by John Hughes. It was distributed by 20th Century Fox and was released in the United States on November 16, 1990. Hughes thought of the idea for the film before leaving on vacation. He was working on a vacation checklist which included a random musing that he should not forget his kids. The idea took shape and resulted in 8 pages of notes that eventually became the movie's screenplay. The film was initially set to be released by Warner Brothers, but the company did not give an adequate budget for the production. After threatening to shut it down several times, Warner Brothers eventually lost the movie to 20th Century Fox. Home Alone is the story of Kevin Mcallister, a 10-year-old living with his family in Chicago. Kevin's parents are planning a family trip to Paris, France, which includes the extended family as well. On the night before the trip, Kevin gets in trouble due to bad behavior, which leads to an argument between him and his mother, ultimately resulting in him having to sleep in the attic. Unbeknownst to the family, strong winds damage power lines in the neighborhood overnight, causing the family to wake up late for the airport. In the mad rush to make their flight, the family forgets about Kevin, leaving him home alone. Kevin, who believes he made his family disappear, has free reign of the house and decides to live a carefree existence, doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants to do it. But he soon realizes that the house is being watched by 2 thieves who plan on breaking in and stealing from his family. Kevin takes it upon himself to defend his home by setting elaborate traps for the burglars, leading to an assist from an unlikely ally at the end of the film. Home Alone had a worldwide gross of nearly $477 million on a budget of $18 million. It received numerous awards and was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, a Golden Globe, and a Grammy. It spawned 5 sequels released from 1992 to 2021. Home Alone has become a Christmas favorite and a holiday tradition for fans all over the world. It is considered by many to be a timeless classic, which is sure to endure for years to come. And that's the lowdown on Home Alone. Certain movies we watch certain times of the year. And as we went into this particular episode, I was kind of racking my brain trying to figure out, okay, what are we talking about here? What movies do we watch certain times of the year? Well, I mean, do you count Valentine's Day? Maybe. But like rom-coms are all the thing. They're all the rage depending on what day of the week it is. And you could have like one that makes a ton of money or one that doesn't make any. But those films can be released pretty much any time of the year. It doesn't really matter what's going on in the world. And then I thought, well, what about, July 4th? You go for the big blockbuster films. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those are like ultra patriotic, those kind of things. And then I was like, well, there's always Thanksgiving. You could probably name on one hand the number of Thanksgiving films we have that we can actually talk about. But the one season in particular, every year, is Christmas. Okay? And of course, when it comes to the Christmas season, you're talking about a ton of movies. And it's like they make more every year. Thanks to places like the Hallmark Channel, Lifetime, BET's in on the game. All these networks, man, every year. If you doubt me, go to Netflix, go to Hulu, go to Amazon Prime. You'll see what I'm talking about. Original Christmas movies starring actors you've never heard of in horrible stories with really crappy acting. Hey, look, I've watched a bunch of them. I know what I'm talking about. However, if you're going to talk about classics, we're talking top shelf, man. Top shelf holiday movies / Christmas. You're hard pressed to get one that you can't mention in the same breath with all the ultra classics. It's a Wonderful Life, Charlie Brown Christmas, all those great ones that I consider to be great. Hard pressed to find one that doesn't fit just as well as Home Alone. Home Alone is, and we'll get into it here today. Home Alone is ridiculous. The story is horrible. I'm just going to say it out the gate. The story's horrible. It's really bad people in here. Terrible parents, terrible kids, Everyone's bad. There's some moments in this movie I feel like the family's worse than the thieves are. But, as I said, we'll get into it. Ashley, Home Alone, where does this movie rank for you in terms of your you personally, all time favorite Christmas movies?
As a kid, I liked it. Like, obviously, I remember seeing it and it was funny. But I've probably watched it more as an adult with children now than I did as a kid. And so it's a lot different for me as an adult watching it with my kids. It's still enjoyable, it's just kind of different. But I think like it's universal, right? Like who hasn't seen Home Alone? So I feel like it is obviously a classic for certain reasons, but I feel like it's also kind of problematic now that I'm a parent. Like I don't know, it's just different now that I'm an adult, but definitely a classic for sure. And I think there's a lot of people who are there's like a little bit of a divisiveness on is it technically a Christmas movie? Like is it just a movie that happens during Christmas time, or do people consider it a Christmas movie?
Interesting. I don't know if I've ever been in that debate about this particular movie. I've had that debate about Die Hard. We probably all have. There's others that I've had that debate about. I watched Trading Places again last night for the upteenth time. I've seen it so many times over the years. But when I'm going through my list of Christmas movies to watch, I kind of always forget Trading Places. Is that a Christmas movie? Does it happen to just take place at Christmas? That's an interesting discussion. What's your opinion on Home Alone? Is it a Christmas movie or does it just happen to take place at Christmas?
So I never really considered it a Christmas movie growing up. Um, but my kids consider it a Christmas movie, but they want to watch it year round. Like my kids are obsessed. Like Home Alone 1, Home Alone 2, Home Alone 3, we've seen that one, which is not great. And then I know there's some in between like offshoots, and then there's a new one on Disney Plus, right? Um,
Hmm.
that came out this year, and we've seen that one too. So like my kids are Home Alone obsessed. They consider it a Christmas movie. As a kid, I felt like it just was like happened at Christmas time. I didn't consider it a Christmas movie. Like Christmas Vacation, Charlie Brown Christmas, those for whatever reason also take place at Christmas time, but those are like I consider those Christmas movies. I didn't consider Home Alone a Christmas movie.
Well, I guess because they're not saving Christmas. Like most Christmas movies,
Yes, exactly.
and like the plot of most Christmas films is, oh, Christmas is ruined. Oh no, wait, and then they save it. Like that's the whole plot of basically every true Christmas movie. So I guess, man, you're blowing it for me. I guess you're right. This isn't technically. Oh, it ruins the mystique of it now.
Right? But like I mean, I guess you could look at it like Kevin, you know, eventually learns the meaning of like family, which you could kind of turn into like Christmas Eve. But yeah, there's no like Christmas itself isn't really the focus. Like Christmas isn't in danger. It's that's not like the main
Right.
plot. So that's I guess that's why I never considered a Christmas movie. But I mean, Christmas is very prevalent in the movie, so I definitely see how it could be considered one.
Wow, man, yeah, whew, that messes with me. I mean, hearing you mention it that way, that's got me rethinking the whole thing. I guess for me, it's just, well, it's one of those movies I watch every Christmas, hence it's a Christmas movie, but it doesn't necessarily, like It's a Wonderful Life was never a Christmas movie. Like it wasn't, that's not how it was conceived. It was just a film, but then they started playing it during the holiday season on TV and it became, oh, this is a Christmas film, which by the way, it's in my top 5 best movies of all time for me personally. So yeah, he's not really saving Christmas, but he kind of is because without him, that whole town has essentially gone to crap without him. So yeah, he kind of does save Christmas, whether he realizes it or not. So there is that. Let's talk about the cast of this film, and we're not, and kids, we're not diving too incredibly deep here. I mean, as we said, if you've not seen Home Alone, I mean, what planet are you on right now? Like that you haven't seen at least once in your lifetime. Macaulay Culkin, young, embattled, burdened with fame at a young age, Macaulay Culkin, who, by the way, Ash, I don't know if you know this, but he's come out on the other side so much better now. And it makes me giddy with joy that this guy is happy and he seems like a really good guy. And I've never heard or read anything like bad about him in terms of him as a person. And he seems to be on his feet and loving life, and that makes me very happy for this guy.
Yes, I've read that too. He seems like he's doing like light years better. I think he was pretty heavily exploited as a child, so it's nice to see that he's kind of taking care of himself and is doing well now as an adult.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, his career didn't last very long, and he had a lot of that was coming from his dad, who wasn't the best person. And I think he actually got emancipated from both of his parents in court. And I think the story goes is that he basically sat on his money for years, and so now he's basically in good shape. Which again, good for him. Um, you're going to do basically an entire franchise off the back of a kid. For God's sake, that kid should be paid and then some. I mean, so yeah, good for him. I mean, here on the 6M, we'll oftentimes not recast, but we'll fantasy cast and think, hey, what if so and so had this role? You could go back to the time that this movie was released, and you could say something like, well, what if this kid had been in the movie instead of this Culkin kid? But I'm not even going to try that here because he is Kevin Mcallister. I can't think of anybody else. I mean, I could go back and do a search on who was popular at the time. And I'm trying to go back through my head right now and think about it. But I mean, he's Kevin McAllister. He's believable. He's young. He's impressionable. He's innocent, obviously. And I mean, this film's iconic, especially with him in it. I mean, did you know him from Uncle Buck before this movie, or did you see Uncle Buck after Home Alone?
I have never made it all the way through Uncle Buck, so
What?
I know. I'm the worst. Okay, there are so many movies that I have not seen. I have not seen Die Hard either, by the way. Um, Figure I throw
Wow.
that out there. But no, I first saw him in Home Alone, and I think that if you look at so Home Alone 1 and 2, right? Both, and I think Home Alone 2 was a great sequel, by the way. Like, I feel like it stood up.
Really?
Yes, I enjoyed Home Alone 2 just as much as I loved Home Alone 1. Did I think it was kind of like inconceivable that this family would leave their son for a second time? Yes, I feel like that's pretty terrible and far fetched. But
Yes.
besides that, I enjoyed it. But if you look at Home Alone 3 and like the other Home Alones that used a different kid, my kids like them, but I feel like they're just not as good. And I think that's because they don't have Macaulay Culkin. They're just not the same. Like he had that level of like precociousness and cute factor, but like could say those lines so clearly. Like it just he did such a good job.
Your daughter agrees. I can so tell.
Oh yes.
It is she. Can you put her in front of a movie and she'll watch it and pay attention, or is she kind of all over the place when a movie's on TV?
It depends on the movie. She's obsessed with Mickey and Minnie's Wish Upon a Christmas, which is on Disney Plus right now. Put that on and she's pretty into it. But yeah, she's kind of into everything. She's very curious and likes to. Yes, we're talking about Daisy. That's her favorite character. Um, she's pretty like independent and likes to like play with things and like she'll do TV a little bit, but she's really likes to play.
What's your thoughts on and you and I are both pro wrestling fans, but it took me a while before I really let my kid, as he was growing up, really sit down and watch it. And when he did, I let him in on it. I let the cat out of the bag because I didn't need my kid thinking that we solved our problems by hitting each other in the face. So I've been countered on that by people who've said, "Oh, Tom, you took the fun out of it for him." I'm like, that's nonsense. I don't need my kid thinking, "Hey, this kid said something to me at school, and I'm gonna, you know, pull the stunner on him, pile driver through the table." So I needed to tell him. What's your thoughts on letting your kids see Home Alone? Do you have to explain? Hey, listen, these two thieves are not really getting hurt. These are just stunts. You don't need to be doing this stuff. I mean, does that occur to you, or do you just sort of go with it as just being just like a form of entertainment?
Well, it's hard, right? Because I think part of the fun of Home Alone and pro wrestling and things like that is that quote unquote like magic of it. So, I've discussed with my kids like as far as like, if there was some kind of a home invasion, please don't set booby traps with your toys, call 911. Let's be realistic in the approach. My kids, as far as pro wrestling, I think I would be kind of on the fence because on the one hand, like I wish I knew going into it as a fan instead of finding out halfway through because I felt so like, like I was lied to. And this was like,
Oh.
like it was just like the whole Santa Claus thing, like just like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know that I would have gotten as into it, if I had known from the get go that it was not real.
Interesting. That's an interesting take, and I'm with you on that. And I'll tell you this: there were at moments as I started getting older, watching the NWA, growing up, there was moments when I would really start watching, like paying attention, and then it started occurring to me, well, wait a minute, why does he let him whip him into the ropes? Like that seems to be, is that cooperation? Why would, and then the other side of my brain would try to explain it away and say, yeah, well, they all know how this thing is done, and that's part of the wrestling. And I'm like, come on. And it occurred to me much later as I started to piece things together. Yeah, I don't know if this is exactly as advertised. So yeah, I'm with you. Just finding out the truth kind of sucked. Talking about the violence in this film, it's very cartoonish. It's very over the top. It's very Wile E. Coyote, very old school Warner Brothers. Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, of course, as Harry and Marv. Uh, the Wet Bandits, which is the silliest name of all time, but now it's become as iconic as the movie. Um, these two together are freaking great. Uh, how dangerous did you think these two guys were in the story? Like, I often wonder when they finally got him at the end and they finally had him, like, were they going to like physically torture this kid? Were they going to kill him? Were they going to shove him in a sewer? I mean, I don't know. These are things a nerd asks himself as he's watching a movie that never actually happened. But uh, it was slapstick up until the end. And when they finally got a hold of him, I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to actually do to this kid? What do you think about Harry and Marv in this movie? How great are they?
Well, I think they're really funny, and that's important because if they weren't funny, I feel like their threat would feel more like scary to the point to
Yeah.
where it wouldn't be like a kid movie or enjoyable, right? If they were like some
Right.
people you would see like on Law and Order or something like, but
Right.
because they were funny and they were kind of like, you could tell like even before like the, traps and such started becoming part of the movie, you could kind of tell that they weren't like the best criminals, right? So
Mm.
I feel like that was important, right? They had to be kind of goofy so they'd seem non-threatening. And like even when they almost run him over, right? Before they realize that he, that he is not, he's the one who's home, right? Not the whatever. They are like, "Hey, watch where you're going." Like so obviously like they're not total monsters, right? So but then, as they are like they're breaking in the house and everything at the end, like you said, when they finally catch him, he's put them through so much torture. I feel like as the audience, like you kind of wonder, like what's gonna happen. Like there is that little bit of fear. I feel like before the scary neighbor from across the street intervenes and like saves him. Um,
Right.
I feel like it kind of goes dark there for a minute, and then in the sequel, like they do like make like physical like vocal threats to him, like that they're gonna kill him, or they have a gun, right? And then in the second one, so like I feel like it does get a little dark there for a second.
And you know what? I'm going to disagree with you on what you said about part two. Like, I was never a fan of part two. It felt like the same
Really?
convoluted story. Yes, the same characters. Had Harry and Marv not been in the movie, and I always thought part two would have been so much more effective had it been two other criminals, not Harry and Marv. And then the last scene of the film is that they're getting locked up, and in the cell next to them is Harry and Marv. I always thought that would have been great.
I think I could see
So,
that. I could see that. Um, but I feel like it's kind of like what is it like that phrase? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the first one
right.
was such a success, and they had Macaulay Culkin, who was adorable, and then they had Harry and Marv, who were like funny, and they had good chemistry together. So I feel like they were like, okay, let's just replicate this, but instead we're gonna do it in New York instead of Illinois or wherever the family is supposed to be living originally. It's not the best. Like when I say I like it, like I'm not like it's not like the best, but like if you've watched the third one, it is light years better than the third attempt.
Oh,
For
yeah,
sure.
no kidding.
I've seen as a sequel. I felt like I liked it, and I remember as a kid when it came out, I remember seeing it, and I liked it then too. So, I just think it's not the best, but it's not. There's way worse sequels that get made.
I agree with that, and part 3 is hot garbage. But listen, when it comes to part 2, it's got former President Dirtbag in it, and for that reason alone, if you're gonna digitally erase Jar Jar Binks, you got to digitally erase that guy too. I'm just saying.
Well, I've heard in one of the versions that did happen. Now I know. I'm trying to remember the last time when the kids and I watched it on Disney Plus, which wasn't that long ago. I'm trying to remember if it's still there. I know they talked about removing it.
Right.
I don't know if it happened. Now I got to watch it again, so it's fine. Like literally this time of year, we watch it on repeat. The first one, the second one. My kids freaking love the third one. We watch it 1, 2, and 3 all year long, and now they really like the new one. Have you watched the new one?
I've heard the new one's not bad, but no, I don't know if I'm going to commit to it or not.
Okay, so it starts rough. The plot though is different than your typical, Home Alone. It's similar but different in the sense that like it's the parents that are doing the breaking and entering, but it's because they think that this child has stolen something from them. So they're not trying to like hurt the child or rob the house. They're just trying to retrieve something that is theirs that they think this kid has taken from them. So that part was interesting. The older brother, Buzz, from the first one, makes a cameo in it. He's a police officer now. And references like Kevin and but yeah, it's not great. It was cute. My kids really liked it again. But it just, if you watch it, I don't know why she's growling at me. If you watch it, I think she's possessed. You will see, like, you'll see why Macaulay Culkin was so good as Kevin. Like, you'll appreciate it so much more because it's like they've stuck a couple different kids in the same scenario and it just doesn't work the same.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a reason why the magic is magic in the first place. Why it's called magic is because it's hard to replicate it. So I totally get it. The parents, we got to talk about the parents because every year I watch this movie and every year I have the same conversation with more than one person about how these are the worst parents in the history of all parenting.
Yes.
Horrible.
Yes.
This kid should have been removed. Maybe all the kids because they're dangerous. John Hurt is Peter and the great Catherine O'Hara is Kate, and they're fantastic.
I love
but
Catherine O'Hara.
She's great. But man, I hate both of their guts in this movie so much because I'm like, you are the worst mother in the history of mothers. Like the conversation she and Kevin has, she sounds just as childish as he does. And when he says the bit about, I wish I had a new family. She goes, well, maybe you should ask Santa for a new one. I'm like, what?
Okay. As a mom who has multiple children and
yes,
has had days where, you're just a little on edge, I don't totally hate her for saying that.
I don't know. That seems, I've only got the one. And God knows I've threatened this kid. I've threatened to sell him to the gypsies for years. I've never made good on it. But, I can still make it happen. But, yeah, I've threatened him multiple times over the years. But, man, some of the stuff she says to him. And then compounded with the fact that the next morning, she doesn't even bother to see if he's even there. Like when she turns around in the van and she's asking her daughter if they're all there. And they're like, oh, yeah. And she's giving them the list of and everything. And I'm thinking, yeah, but like the kid that you sent to bed because you thought he was bad when really Uncle Frank is the true villain of this film. I'm sorry, I stick to it.
He's terrible. Yes, he's toxic.
Yes, my God, he's horrible. She didn't even bother to see if he was there. How do you know you're going to leave your kid home alone? But dude, that seemed crazy to me.
That's where I feel like it kind of loses a little bit of realism, and I don't know, like maybe my life isn't typical, compared to other people's, but like I literally cannot take 2 steps in my house without running into one of my kids. My kids are constantly underfoot. Like, they follow me to the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. When I go to leave the house, they're at the back door if they're not coming with me. Like, there's, very few instances where I don't know where my children are. But if I was leaving for a trip with that many people, I would make sure I had eyes on my kids. There's no way, especially if I made one sleep in the attic the night before leaving. Like, I would be like, I guess, if I overslept, and I mean, I don't know. But yeah, I think that that's like the first red flag on her. Not the threatening, like, ask Santa for a new family. I used to tell my kids, when they were unhappy with me, that they could try to go to the new mommy store and make an exchange, right? Exchange me for a different mother. And they would,
Wow.
say, I don't want to exchange you for a new mom. And I'd be like, well, then, you're stuck with me. And so let's figure this out. But I never left my kids and went to Paris. And I also have never, like, I've never left my kids in the car. Like, I don't get that. Like, my kids are so ingrained in my brain. I can't really fathom doing that. But then, maybe it's different when you have that many people in a household at one time. I don't know.
Yeah, and when my son was younger, I would catch grief and be told, "Oh, you're smothering him too much. Oh, you're all over him too much." Because like he wouldn't get 6 feet away from me, no matter where we were. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to be that dad on the news who's telling the guy holding the microphone, he was right there. He was right there. And I turn back around and he's gone. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be that dad. No chance. Like, yeah, I kept him on a short leash, metaphorically speaking, obviously, but yeah, like you said, I can't imagine not knowing where my kids are at any given time. But I'm telling you, every year when I watch this movie, I have the same conversation out loud, whether I'm alone or not. I'm like, look at these people. These people suck. She's the worst mom ever. And like, I don't feel bad for her at all. Like when she realizes that she left him at home, like, I'm like, yeah, you should feel bad. You are a horrible mom. Like this is a horrible family. Your kids are horrible to your son. Frank you should have thrown Frank out of the plane. No shoot. This guy's the worst of the worst. I mean, just a horrible family. And here's not for nothing. Why would you want to go to France with all these wackadoodle people? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't in a heartbeat. Like, do you do family vacations like more than just you and your own family from your house, like you and your extended family? I've never done that in my life.
Well, I've done that, and I can tell you it is very crazy. I mean, we've never gone anywhere like France or anything like that, but we've gone to like Disneyland. We've gone to Big Bear, which is like, mountains type place. We've done small ones with big groups of people, and it is a little crazy and it is a little hectic. And you do kind of find yourself trying to like people please a little bit, or like you might discipline your kids for things that you wouldn't normally discipline them for, because like
Mm-hmm.
you just are trying to maintain some semblance of equality amongst the kids. If their family doesn't allow something, you're like, okay, I'll crack down on that, kind of thing. So it is very stressful, right? Traveling in big groups like that. I will say that, but I can't imagine getting on an airplane and not sitting with my children, or not knowing that my children were all safely buckled. Like, I understand they had an older kid who was like the one in charge, but as a mom, and again, I may just be one of those crazies that like is too involved with their kids, but like there is no way I would leave that to anybody else to make sure my kids were safely on an airplane.
Yeah, I'm with you. My son and I recently went to Chicago, and he sat right beside me, of course, on the plane. And they're coming around. You got to buckle yourself in. They're checking, and I rechecked his buckle. I don't know how many times, and I'm just thinking, yeah, I got to be sure he's okay. Like it's again, kids. This all goes back to the idea of, hey, we try to be good parents, but if it's a slapstick comedy, not so much. I mean, if the kid doesn't get left home alone, you got no movie. It's kind of the name of it. So, I'm too hard on this film. I mean, I do love watching it. I enjoy it. I still get laughs out of it even to this day, but I'm way too hard on it. talk about and it's the neighbor. It's the creepy neighbor. It's almost like when you're growing up, more than likely you've got someone in the neighborhood that maybe no one knows. From a distance, he comes off a little weird. Maybe he's a little mysterious. Um, Roberts Blossom as Marley. And I'm gonna hit you with some fan theories here in a few minutes. And there's a great one about him. He is great. And he's like a kindly old grandfather. He is, of all the performances in this film, I would think his is the most sincere. He comes off the least like a cartoon character. He feels like a real person to me, and he always has. And I guess that's the nature of what this role is supposed to be, but I know it's the actor as well. I mean, I love the character of Marley in this movie.
Oh yeah, he was great as the creepy neighbor. Like as a kid, I remember feeling like legit uncomfortable when he was on the screen. Like at the end, you realize he's a good guy and all that. But like leading up to that, like I don't know, like Kevin's scared of him, and I felt like I was scared of him too as a kid watching it. Like I think he did a really good job. But I also felt like it was really like a really good touch of like heartwarming when you finally kind of get a little bit of his backstory, and Kevin is like understands he's a real person and not just this scary person from across the street who's always shoveling his snow.
Yeah, for sure. And when he makes the turn through the movie and you realize his true origin story, you're like, oh, yeah, like you say, he's a good guy. But yeah, I love the actor. I love this role. It's so great. He is no longer with us, unfortunately. But yeah, he's um, awesome in this movie. I loved him. Um, we got to talk about the one and only, one of the greatest of all time to ever do this. He could be, slapstick, fall on his face, physical comedy, or he could be very nuanced and very subtle. He could do everything a comedian could do and then some. The great John Candy as Gus Polanski. Um, and he did this part for scale. In fact, I think the pizza delivery kid got paid more per day than John Candy got because he did it as a favor. And it's like John Candy, who left us way too soon. Um, is this? I can't call this his best role, but for the small amount of screen time he had in this movie, he's so great, isn't he?
Definitely. And I mean, he does play a pivotal role in the movie. It's a small role, but an important one. Without it, she would not have made it home to Kevin. So, you know, kind of important. But yeah, no, he's great. And I think that, there's a really good cast in this film. Like, it's not a serious movie, obviously. It's not something that would generate like Oscar buzz or anything like that. But,
Right.
for the cast that they put together, it's not over the top goofy. You know what I mean? Like it's still like it's just a really good children's movie, I would say.
There's heart to this. And I mean, some people might argue that point. I don't know. But I think there's serious heart to this movie. When you get past, again, how wretched the parents are, I'm going to die on that hill. I don't care what anyone says. But once you get past, or I get past that, there's a lot of serious heart to this movie. And I don't, who learns? Okay, here's the question. Who learns the biggest lesson in this movie? I mean, Kevin is a little kid, little tiny kid who's going to continue to say dumb stuff, who's going to continue to make mistakes, who's going to continue to break stuff and eat stuff he shouldn't and say things he shouldn't and be places he shouldn't be. That's not going to change because he was left home alone. I mean, who learned a lesson in this movie? Do you think the mom learned it? Because the
No.
dad, to me, the dad looks like he didn't learn
I
anything at
don't think
all.
anybody learned anything, honestly. Because if you look at the fact that there was a sequel, like, okay, clearly they did not
Right.
learn to keep track of Kevin better because they lose him again. Kevin doesn't learn that the importance of family, because even though at the end he's all like, oh, I even missed like my brother who I fight with, we fast forward to the sequel, he's still fighting with his siblings. He's still saying how annoying his family is, like, and how much fun he's having at first without them. So clearly he didn't learn anything. Uncle Frank is still a jerk. In the sequel, nobody's changed, so I would say nobody learned anything, honestly. If anything, it was the creepy neighbor across the street. like reconciled with his, family. Oh, and the Wet Bandits, obviously they have not given up their life of crime either, because they planned on robbing that toy store in the sequel. So
I mean, and God, those are some great points. Nothing really changed except for Marley. It almost feels like the point of the whole movie, the whole story, was to reunite Marley with his son, which is what happened. Because had Kevin not been, oh man, there's a fan theory. I can't wait to hit you with it. But had Kevin not been there to talk to this old man and convince him to give it a chance, then maybe he doesn't get his son back and doesn't get to meet his granddaughter in person. I mean, that's wow. Maybe this movie's not about Kevin and his family at all. It's about Marley.
the whole premise of Home Alone is they want you at the end to feel like, some kind of heartwarming, Kevin appreciates his family appreciates Kevin, like all of that. But really, like, I feel like you said, Marlon's story is the real deal on having heart compared to the other story.
Oh yeah, for sure. We got to talk about said family. And there's a big long list of people because obviously this family's huge. Angela Gothals is Lenny, Kevin's older sister. Devin Ratray is the infamous Buzz, Kevin's oldest brother, who, by the way, yes, he is dumb as a rock. Gary Bamman is Uncle Frank, and yes, worst uncle of all time. Actually, I think it's Jerry Bamman, excuse me. Jerry Bamman is Uncle Frank, worst uncle of all time. We can all agree on that. Hillary Wolf is Megan, Kevin's oldest sister. Michael Morona is Jeff, Kevin's older brother. Kristen Mentor is Heather, Kevin's oldest cousin. Diana Campanale is Sandra, Kevin's older cousin. Jedediah Cohen is Rod, Kevin's older cousin. My God, it never ends. Kieran Culkin, Kevin's brother, as Fuller. Fuller's going to wet the bed if he has too much of that Coke. Senta Moses as Tracy, Kevin's older cousin. Anna Slotke as Brooke, Kevin's younger cousin. Finally, a younger one. Terry Snell as Aunt Leslie, Uncle Frank's wife. Jeffrey Wiseman as Mitch Murphy, an 8-year-old neighbor of the Mcallisters, whom Heather mistakes for Kevin during the head count. Virginia Smith as Georgette, Kevin's aunt, wife of Uncle Rob, and mother of Heather and Stefan. Matt Doherty as Stefan, Kevin's older cousin. This will never end. Ralph Foodie as gangster number one. Thank God someone without family ties here. Ray Toller as Uncle Rob, Kevin's uncle, younger brother of Peter and Uncle Frank, and father of Heather and Stefan. I think we finally reached the end of the family. Freaking thank God. I don't think I've ever had this much family, period, ever.
Well, I've been around this much family, but I feel like in the movie, like it was necessary to create the chaos, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, like, really, besides Uncle Frank, Fuller, because obviously he's the one that's going to pee the bed, Buzz, and who else of those family members you listed are really memorable? Nobody.
The sister is saying, Kevin, you're what the French call les incompetents. And then there's the other kid that says you're such a disease.
Yes.
If I ever heard my kid saying the words, you are such a disease, he is grounded for life. That's the worst thing to say to somebody.
Well, I would agree. Because, like I said, my siblings are so much older than me, so I didn't grow up like with them really, But
Right.
like seeing how my kids interact, like that, unfortunately, is the type of things that siblings say to each other. They're horrible, but like my kids are more creative. Like they kind of like do it without it sounding like an insult, but it is. Like my oldest told my youngest, or I'm sorry, not my youngest, my middle, once, like, do you want to see the ugliest thing in the whole world? And Grayson was probably like 4, and he was like, yeah, I do. He's like, okay, go in the bathroom and look in the mirror.
Oh,
so
God.
Grayson goes in the bathroom, looks in the mirror, and he's like, I'm in the bathroom. And he's like, are you looking in the mirror? And he's like, yeah. He's like, what do you see? I see me. He goes, that's the ugliest thing in the world. And then Grayson's like, Mom, like I heard the whole thing happening, and it was like a very creative way to insult your brother, but like you said, not very nice. But unfortunately, siblings are ruthless.
It's like, bravo on the work you put in, kid. But yeah, don't ever freaking do that again. Man, don't let your kids watch Home Alone anymore. I think that's the moral of that little story.
Oh yeah, Home Alone has convinced my oldest, who by the way is like a teddy bear, right? He couldn't hurt a fly. have convinced him that he would be able to hold his own against, robbers, intruders, and all of the like. And I'm like, no, 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 you would not.
Wow. Hey, here's something to think about, something I've pondered over the years. Sometimes I ask myself, because I go back in my head and I remember how I was as a kid. I don't know how you would answer this question, but I've asked myself, what would I do in the same sort of not slapstick situation, but what would I do if I were left alone at that age and I knew two guys were trying to bust in? Would I fall apart, hide behind the couch and terrify and wet my pants? Would I fight back? Like, were you like a tough kid? I know this is a weird thing to try to imagine, but if anybody ever came at you in a certain way growing up, did you hold your own? Were you a tom girl? Did you stand your ground, or because for me, I would have ran for my life. There's no chance I would have been able to stand to anybody growing up.
Yeah, no. I was a huge wuss. I did spend a lot of time alone as a kid, but like not by choice. And I was not like,
Right.
you know, when I was little, when I was probably Kevin's age, like, do they ever say how old he's supposed to be?
God, I want to say 9, but I could be wrong.
When I was like, I don't know, probably somewhere where I would estimate around Kevin's age, and I stayed home alone, I didn't really have a huge fear. That came when I got a little bit older, like teenage years, I became a young woman and all that stuff. Like, when I started to learn more about the world, then I kind of got like what I would consider like a healthy fear of things. But no, if I was left home alone, I don't think I would have tried to tough it out. I think I would have, he goes to the store to buy like a toothbrush. I probably would have told the cashier, I'm home alone and I need help.
Right. Why did he never tell anyone? Because
So so you have your fan theory, and then I have another fan
yes.
theory that I want to discuss that ties into that question. So when we get to
Okay.
fan theories, I have one for you as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So Culkin was born in 1980 and Home Alone was released in 1990. So he was like 9 years old when the movie came out. I don't think he was 10 yet. So I'm guessing the age for Kevin was either 9. Actually, he was 10 years old when it came out. So I'm guessing that in the film, Kevin is 10 years old. We've ran down the cast pretty well here. So we're going to get into some behind the scenes stuff here in a few. But let's talk about, because now you've piqued my interest. Hit me with a fan theory. What have you got now?
Okay, so the fan theory that I saw was like going back to why didn't Kevin ask for help? Some people have hypothesized that it's because Kevin was a little bit of a sociopath, even at a young age. He didn't want help. He knew that the robbers were coming and he wanted to set those traps because he enjoyed hurting others. The reason he didn't ask for help was because he wasn't really like this kid in distress. He was actually like a little like sociopath, and that he probably grows up to be a criminal himself.
That is really, really good stuff. And piggybacking on the back of that is the idea that it's maybe the best fan theory I've ever heard, that Kevin grows up to be Jigsaw.
Ooh, that is creepy. Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
That's good, right? It's really good. And like the character in the movie, his name is not Kevin Mcallister, but you could always say that he changed his name because he was placed in the witness protection program after the events of Home Alone 2.
Wow. I mean, I feel like that could possibly be like, I definitely feel like you could see Kevin Mcallister on like an episode of Criminal Minds, right?
Yes.
Like, or something, because like, yeah, he does. Like, why didn't he? Like, I understand the phone lines were down, like, so you couldn't call for help, but and most of the neighbors were out of town, but you can't tell me that everyone on Kevin's street was out of town. And then he walks by the church. He doesn't go in there. He goes to the grocery store, doesn't say anything, goes to the convenience store, doesn't say anything, like, and then, he doesn't answer the door when the police come. You could argue because he was scared, but like, I don't know. Like, I feel like those are all valid questions. Like, why? What is it with this kid that? And then when it happens again in New York, why doesn't he go to the front desk of the plaza or even the airport when he realized he's gotten on the wrong flight? Instead of getting in a cab and going to the plaza and doing all of the things that he does, why doesn't he tell someone, I was supposed to be on a plane to Florida?
Yeah, and all of your explanations make much more sense for part two. Because in part two, this crap's already happened. But I will counter with this for part one. Um, Kevin believes that he's the reason his family's gone. He wished them away. And so it happened. So in his mind, this is how life is now. I'm by myself. I got to make the best of it. I got to feed myself. I got to buy my own groceries. I made all this happen. Well, I got what I wanted. Nobody can really help me anyway. So I'm just going to do this on my own. So if I had to counter with anything, maybe it would be that.
Yeah, no, that is fair. That is fair. And, I think though, like, it's hard because like I feel like they're asking us to believe multiple like layers here, right? Like we're supposed to believe that Kevin is this naive kid, but then the
Right.
same kid who's that naive also devised all of these booby traps and set them up so successfully and have no remorse for what is happening. I mean, granted, they
Ooh.
were burglars.
That's a great counter to my counter, actually. And you're 100% right because um, he wished his parents away and didn't have any remorse about that. So why would he have remorse about these two thieves? So maybe he's not a good kid after all to begin with. So maybe he is the problem.
Well, he
Um,
is kind of bratty in the beginning, right? I mean, yeah, the thing with the
yeah,
cheese pizza wasn't really his fault, and his brother was picking on him, and you kind of get that he gets that sympathy vote, pretty early on, but at the same time, he's also the one that refuses to apologize and make any kind of compromise, right? Like his mom just basically asks in the beginning, like, you need to apologize for your behavior, and he refuses, which is why he's sent upstairs to sleep by himself in the attic, which is like back to the terrible parents. But who forces their kids to sleep in an attic?
right.
It's do we really believe that Kevin's parents left him as an accident, or was it like they left
Ooh.
him because he was a bratty kid, and then they had to come back because they had to cover their tracks?
Oh, man. You're okay. So now you're blowing me away because now yeah. Wow. What an interesting train of thought that is. They leave him on purpose, not like so he would get hurt, but because it's him and they know how he is and most of the time they can't take it because he's just so bad. Oh man, that's crazy.
Right? I'd love to say that that's far fetched, but like maybe back when this movie was made, it was. But look at the crazy things you see in the news now about parents and the things they do to their
Yeah.
children. Like it's not far fetched to think that they left him on purpose and then that the mom came back to like as some sort of attempt to make it seem like it was all this big accident.
Right, right. That's something to think about. And leave it up to a bunch of freaking nerds to dissect a movie that was nothing but a movie and only meant to be funny. But we do it with everything. I don't know about you. I do it with everything. I dissect everything. We did the Friends episode and we dissected, you know, uh, character motivations and thoughts and feelings. I'm like, yeah, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, yeah, this is fun, but like this, they didn't even write that. We're writing it right now. But you know what? I can't help it. It's kind of, as I said, I'm a nerd. I do this stuff all the time.
Well, I think that's part of the fun. And like when you become a fan of something, which obviously, if you've seen Home Alone more than once or twice, you would consider yourself a fan of the movie because otherwise, why are you watching it so much?
Right.
When you're a fan, that's how you keep connections to things that no longer are producing new like content or storylines, right?
Mm.
That's how you relive it is by kind of just going back and going over what you do have to watch and what you do have to hang on to.
Yeah, it's like the original Star Wars trilogy when all we had was the original first three movies. As fans, we were in our minds looking at what things were like before and after. And I had friends and I who were, going through this whole idea of, okay, what happened after Jedi? Well, this happened the year after. This happened 10 years after. We were doing that for years, long before, uh, J.J. Abrams came along. I mean, we were we were doing this stuff long before Disney ever bought the IP. I mean, it's like you said, it's something like when there's no new content, you just sort of keep spinning off in your mind and sort of, as I said earlier, fantasy booking. A few other fan theories here that I think are worth talking about. The idea that Peter Mcallister is a mob boss. Have you heard this one?
I have not, but given the size of their house and the fact that they're going to
Yes.
France, I feel like I'm going to say that whatever you're going to say tracks, but go ahead.
Okay, so his job is never explained. They never say specifically what he does for a living. And as you said, he takes his entire family to France. His behavior around Joe Pesci, who at the time he thought was a cop, and the blasé way he says, "Am I under arrest or something?" as if to say, "I've faced down a cop before. I don't really care." Um, and then when the wet bandits are inside the van, and he tells Marv, he says, "That's the home. I've been thinking about this one. That's the one I've this is the only one I'm thinking. We're doing all this to get this, the Mcallister home," as if he knew it was loaded with all kinds of stuff. In fact, he says electronics and this, that, and the other. I'm like, and plus, maybe he knew there was money stashed inside, hidden in the walls, hidden in the safe, hidden in the floors, because it's a mob boss that he's going to rob from.
I mean, look at their bedroom, like the master bedroom, where they wake up and they're like, oh, we're late. We didn't set the alarm or whatever. Like, they have this huge 4-poster bed, tons of bedding, these big expensive curtains. Like, the house inside and out looks expensive. And they're,
Right.
like you said, their whole family, which is not a small family, is going to France. Yeah, like how does he make his money then, if not, as a mob boss? Where did all of this Mcallister money come from? Also, he had enough money in the sequel on his credit card for Kevin to charge multiple night stays at the Plaza Hotel, and it didn't get declined because he didn't have enough money on his credit limit. It got declined because he reported the card stolen eventually. But the 2 nights leading up to that, 2 nights at the Plaza, that couldn't have been cheap either.
Man, great call. I mean, again, you're referencing a movie I don't care about, but uh, it makes perfect sense. Because, yeah, wow, man, that kind of feeds into it. Plus, the way he dresses, he's got that long trench coat and the scarf, and his hair is slicked back, and oh man, I'm starting to love this theory more and more. It's all just theories here, kids, but I really kind of love this now.
I think it tracks. I think it could have some momentum. I definitely could see that as a possibility.
What about the idea that Gus Polanski is the devil?
I don't think I've heard that one.
Oh, it's good. So she's in the airport and she tells the girl behind the counter, "I would sell my soul to the devil if I have to get home." And in that moment, John Candy speaks up and says, "Excuse me." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." So the idea is, by agreeing to go with him, she sold her soul to the devil because he said, "Hey, I know what you want. I'll get you home." But as with a lot of other times when you make a deal with the devil, yeah, you get what you're wanting, but maybe you would have got it anyway, because she gets home, but 2 minutes after she's in the door, here comes her whole family. Has she just took the next flight the next day?
Right.
Yeah. So it's the devil's way of saying, "Hey, I'll give you what you want," but yeah, like he's messing with her the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that one as much. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, you say you don't buy it until you see John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles as the devil when the car is going between the two big rigs, and you're like, "Oh, he is the devil."
Well, maybe if they'd had someone who looked a little more threatening, but I guess if I were the devil and I were out snatching souls, I would try to look friendly too. So I guess I guess if I believed that the devil was going to be in a Home Alone movie, I guess I could see that possibly. But I think that's not my favorite fan theory I've heard.
Well, no, me either. But to go with what you're saying, if the devil looked evil, you'd never listen to him. So yeah, of course he's going to be the nice guy. So there's also a good one that, and this seems more far fetched than I think anything I've personally heard. Peter was training secret agents. His whole family, his kids in particular, were going to become secret agents. He knew his home was going to be hit, so he intentionally left Kevin at home to prep him for his future as a secret agent. Now that one seems like a bit of a stretch for me.
It does, because really, are there people out there training kid armies of secret agents, probably not. But I mean, if you were trying to look for some way for this to not come back on the parents as being horrible, then you could say, oh, well, this was just part of his training to become, and that's why he was so good at those booby traps, because it's the family business. They're secret agents,
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I all the fan theories, I think they're all fun, and you could argue them, most of them, to make them relevant, but at the end of the day, it's just a kids movie, and what do kids like? Slapstick comedy. So let's put in some booby traps, Joe Pesci. Let's make some funny, injuries, and have a box office hit on our hands.
Very true. I got one more for you, and this trumps everything. This is better than Kevin Becomes Jigsaw in my mind as a comic book nerd / geek of all things. This is my favorite of all time. Old Man Marley is Kevin from the future.
Okay, that seems like that could be plausible.
That's good, right? So the idea is, in the original storyline, there was no Marley. So Kevin answered the door when the cops showed up because he wasn't scared by Marley and was hiding under the bed. So the cop took him somewhere safe. In the meantime, the wet bandits robbed the house and flooded it, the Mcallister house, because Kevin wasn't there. It affected Kevin as well as his family. Kevin never healed from it all, dealt with it for years, and his relationship with his own son was affected. So in the future, Kevin convinces his son and family to travel back in time with him. Because of the appearance of Marley in the church, Kevin was emboldened to fight the wet bandits and grew up close to his family.
I guess, I mean, I like the idea of the creepy guy being Kevin from the future, right? Like, because I just think that's interesting. The rest of that sounds like a bit of a stretch. I mean, it could be a completely different movie. But do I think that that's what was really happening when this was like being developed? Probably not.
I think it gets lost when you have to consider that he had to bring back his estranged family with him, who never would have agreed to come back. I think that's where it dies on the vine for me. But up until that point, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you like to think that there's like this good backstory to a person like Marlon, right? Like that it's not just like it's like the Boo Radley, right? To Kill a Mockingbird. He's not just the creep down the street. He's actually a really sweet person who is the victim of circumstance. And as because of his circumstance, unfortunately, the whole community treats him a certain way until they learn the truth, right? I mean, it's classic. You see it in all kinds of movies. The Boo Radley reference is my favorite because I love To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah, I mean, every tortured character is better when they have a really good backstory.
Yes, absolutely. Some facts about this movie, kids, and this is some good stuff here. This film only had a budget initially of $10 million, and it was a Warner Brothers film. Warner Brothers threatened to shut this thing down several times because they were going over budget and were behind. And so they eventually shopped this thing to 20th Century Fox, who ate it up and loved it. So they ended up with a budget of $18 million. This movie, to date, has made almost $477 million.
Wow.
I mean, I would say they did pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never know, right? With a plot like this, I mean, imagine you're pitching this to someone and you're going to tell them, like, okay, there's these parents and they're going to leave their kid at home. And I feel like, sitting in on that meeting, somebody somewhere is going to be like, let me stop you right there. Wait, what do you mean the parents leave the kid at home? Like, how does that happen? And then, like, I'm sure it was a bit of a sell, right? Getting someone to buy into this. But, like, obviously it paid off. Like you said, it's made, crazy amount of money. I wonder what was such a big budget. Like, it wasn't a lot, but I mean, that sounds like a lot to me for what we see in the movie, right? Because almost everything takes place in that house.
Well, supposedly at the time, when they were told they were given 10 million, they all laughed at it and said, "You got to be kidding." So even in 1990, 10 million was no kind of budget for a movie at all.
Right.
So
Okay.
apparently Warner Brothers didn't have any faith in this thing to begin with.
Well, yeah, and I can see that. But like you would think, like with everything being centrally focused on the house, I mean, obviously movies are not cheap to make, so there's like a budget there no matter where you film it, right? There's going to be certain costs that have to happen. But besides that, I mean, do you think a lot of that budget was the cast?
Oh, absolutely. The cast, and on top of that, there was the interior of the home is not a house. The interior of the home is actually, and it's crazy, it is a set, a 2-story set that was built in a high school gym, New Trier Township High School. I get it. Um, and the school was also the same location for Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Uncle Buck. And what happened was they decided to do this in the gym because they had very, very high ceilings, had a plenty of room. They built an actual 2-story inside of the house deal that you could go upstairs and everything was perfectly structurally sound and safe. And then near the end, when they had to flood the house for that scene, they decided to take the house and rebuild it in the swimming pool portion of this school. So when they flooded the house, the water was just going to go into the pool and it wouldn't damage the gym floors or anything like that. So every time you see inside the house, they're not inside that house, they're in the set.
Okay, well that sounds expensive. So I mean
Yes.
that could be some of the budget right there. And I do remember reading. I don't remember when, but I do remember reading that they did pay the people whose house it is a pretty good amount of money to use the house for the shots that they used it for.
Yes. The house is located, still standing, kids. It's Winnetka, Illinois. And at one time, the house was surrounded by a wrought iron fence. The owners had no interest in the Hollywood theme. They didn't care about it. They wouldn't answer the door if people were coming by to get photos or whatnot. But I don't know if the house has changed owners. But now you can actually go and like stay the night in the house. I guess they're
Like an
using it as a bread
Airbnb
and
thing. I
back.
read that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, which is cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of pretty cool. So, but yeah, they thanks to the set design and of course I guess paying the cast and paying for everything they had to pay for in the regular production of a film, they went over budget very quickly. Um, and yeah, it's just so much stuff that was behind the scenes. On the second day of shooting, second day in, kids, they were buried by snow. And it's like, okay, we've got to get the shot that we need. We got to go right now while the snow is happening. So they got the last shot of the movie where Kevin's at the window waving to Marley was actually the second day of shooting because it was actually snowing that day.
That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read that that's not really that unusual for them to have to reshoot things or shoot things out of order in order to
Oh,
get
yeah.
things when they can get them.
Yeah. And supposedly the snow eventually stopped, so they had to keep it snowing, and the snow wasn't blowing the way they wanted it to blow. So they used potato flakes instead of a snow making machine, which, supposedly once they hit the ground and stayed there for a while, they got pretty ripe and it became really disgusting and kind of stank up the neighborhood, supposedly. So that's an interesting little tidbit there for you. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Something else interesting is a character actor named Dan Roebuck. And by the way, you don't know who he is, but I guarantee if I showed you his picture, you'd know him because you'd be like, oh, I've seen him and stuff before. He was initially cast as Marv, but as the story goes, he and Joe Pesci had no chemistry on set. It wasn't clicking. And Chris Columbus, by the way, kids, who directed this, who's directed a bunch of stuff, who did an excellent job with this film, in my opinion, really wanted Daniel Stern. And according to Columbus, the moment they put Stern on set and they started going through a take, he was tremendous. And he and Pesci had chemistry from the moment they started talking. You don't recast the Wet Bandits. I mean, these two guys are great together.
Definitely. And like I said, when you watch the subsequent Home Alones that do not have the original cast in them, it's just not the same. Like I think it's the third one. It's the one my kids make me watch all the time. Um, they've got like, I want to say it's 4 robbers, right? They're like this criminal organization group that are like international or something like that. And they're just awful. Like, not that like the Wet Bandits were like the epitome of stellar acting or anything, but it's just not the same. Like, it's just, not good.
Right. God, four bandits. Jeez, it's almost like, well, we did the one movie with the 2 of them. Now we got to do another movie with 4 of them. It's going to do another one. Let's do 8 of them. Like they just keep. Oh man, I don't know. Make the one, stay with the one. Like I'm a huge fan of Elf. I love to this day that every time Will Ferrell's been approached, he said no because he's like, we don't need a sequel. The first Elf is fine. Leave it alone. I'm like, yes, all the more reason to love, respect, and admire Will Ferrell because sometimes all you need is just the one movie.
Yeah, and I don't like. You have to ask yourself, like, when they do a sequel and it's for the fans, like that's one thing, right? Like sometimes it doesn't always pan out. But like when the intent behind it is just to give the fans more or give them closure or give them something, that's honorable, right? Like you can kind of be
Right.
like, okay, it didn't work, but your intentions were good. But what is the intention behind these multiple Home Alone movies if not to just try to make money? Like make a movie at the holidays that families are going to sit home and stream and we're going to make some money. Like, do you think anybody sat down with this most recent Home Alone and was really like, let's give these Home Alone fans what they want?
I got 4 words for you. Dollar dollar bill, y'all. That's what all this is. And unfortunately, there's no, as we said, no one's getting better. No characters are developing. You don't get a new story. It's the same story every time.
It's like, I could have gotten behind the new one if it was like Kevin's kid, right? The only reference to McAllisters in the newest movie is that the alarm system in the house is a Mcallister alarm. So you learn that Kevin has grown up and has made home security alarms, which is interesting. And that Buzz makes a reference that as a police officer, every year at Christmas time, he gets a prank call about a kid who was left home alone, and it's his brother Kevin playing a joke on him. So like that part's fun, like a little nod to like, but like besides that, like they're not really in the movie.
God, I actually kind of really love that they were incorporating some of that into it. That's fan service. And fan service I'm fine with. An entire movie based on fan service, I could live without that. But no, I get it. Like insert those moments for fans who have helped your movie make as much money as it's made over the years. Yeah, I'm with that. Joe Pesci, who there's the one scene where he's out in the snow and he sounds like Yosemite Sam. And Daniel Stern's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? So the story is that Pesci, when he reads a script, flat out said that he was going to have a problem not saying the F word during this movie because supposedly when he reads a script that he would use the F word every 2 to 3 words when he read through a script. I guess it's habit. I don't know. Whatever it is, I guess it's how he normally speaks. So he made up his own language where he could curse, but he wasn't really cursing because it's a kid's movie. So in the scene in the snow when he sounds like Yosemite Sam, that's him doing what he did on the set all the time. It's just that they, I guess, caught it on film for that scene. I love that,
That's
and I'm
hysterical.
telling you, if they ever, he's the real life. If they ever do a live action Bugs Bunny, I'm telling you, Yosemite Sam.
Well, yeah, and he's just so funny, right? Like I feel like he had great reactions to what was happening to him. Like,
yeah.
Not that like, it, again, we're back to like it's slapstick comedy, it's not an Oscar performance, but his reactions were good. Like they seemed like he was really in pain. Like they weren't over the top and they weren't like ridiculous. They seemed on par with what was happening, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not for nothing, he's a really good actor. So, I mean, you can't not be a good actor once you are one. So he's going to incorporate his reactions and stuff are going to be part of how good he is. So yeah, there's moments where it's extremely believable. Like he's the scene where he's laying back and the spider's on his chest and Marv's got the I think it's the baseball bat. And he just looks up at him. He's like, "What are you doing, Marv?" It's just so funny because he's out of breath, he's exhausted, and he's in so much pain. And he's got that little kid voice, like, what's this? What are you doing? It's so freaking funny. Like,
And here's my question to you, since we're talking about the Wet Bandits. Why do you think it is that they didn't just give up, right? Like after the first couple of times that they were injured by this kid in his like traps, why do you think they didn't just say, you know what, let's cut our losses, right? We've already robbed a couple houses in the neighborhood. We've made some money. Like, why not just cut your losses? Or like when they split up, right, and they're trying to get the kid, quote unquote, you know, one of them's going after the kid. Why wasn't the other one like robbing the house at least?
oh man, that's a great question. And on top of that, all right, so here's my question to you though. When did he actually see them face to face? Because could it have been that they were thinking, well, he can ID us. We have to physically get him first before we can call it a night here.
Possibly. I want to say, like, though, that they get put through a couple of things before they actually, like, see him face to face. But they knew it was the kid that they almost ran over, right? Because they almost run him over, and then they're like, well, let's follow him, right? So they follow him, and then that's when they realize that he's home alone. So, and here's the other thing, right? Like, again, we're back to Sinister. You know, these at the beginning, you think they're just burglars, these burglar guys, right? As you watch the movie, you know, they realize that Kevin is home alone, right? That the person who's at the Mcallister house is not, they assume now that it's Kevin and that he's alone. Well, they still choose to enter the house under the guise of robbing it. So that's okay, back to another question, back to you. You know, what was their plan? Was their plan that they were just going to go in the house, tie Kevin up, rob it, and then leave him there tied up alone while his family's in Europe? Because they knew his family was in Europe because they told them at the beginning of the movie. Or were they all along going to plan on like murdering him or kill him or something? Because like what was, like, again, I'm back to like what was their actual plan here? They knew there was a kid home alone, and then what? Like what were they going to do with Kevin?
Oh man. Whew, I don't know. Like I think I threw that at you at one point. Were they going to kill him? Was that the plan? Because they finally get him in their clutches, so to speak. And yeah, what's the plan now? Like, but you know what? You could explain all this by just saying, well, they're both kind of dumb. I mean, Marv's an idiot, and Harry's the brains of the group, and that's not saying much because he's kind of dumb too. So maybe they didn't have a plan. Is that a cop out?
No, I think maybe that's like their Achilles heel, right? Is the fact that there was no plan, or that their original plan was just, you know, get in, get the stuff, and then they realize, okay, there's a kid there. Well, it's just a kid, so we'll get the kid, then we can get the stuff. But somewhere along the line, like the focus becomes more on getting Kevin and getting revenge for all of the, you know, pain he's inflicted on them, and less about robbing the house, which at the beginning seemed like the big thing that they were out to do because it was like this holy grail robbery.
I like that answer. I like that answer. That at first they're determined because according to Harry, there's so much stuff in the house. And he's had this eye on this house for a long time. And it's the only reason they're there is this house. But then it becomes about, I want to get this kid. I want to get him back for what he's done to us. I guess that just becomes the prevailing thought for the whole movie, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it is kind of carried on to the next movie, right? Like, again, I know you're not a fan, but if you watch Home Alone 2, you know, they bump into him, and Harry's immediately like, we got to get that kid. Like, that's the kid. You know, he's the reason we were hit and, you know, injured. He's the reason we went to jail. And, like, you know, so you can tell there's a lot of animosity towards Kevin from the Wet Bandits that carried over into the second film. So I guess at some point during the first film, it became less about the robbery and more about revenge.
Yeah, yeah, and in part two, you understand why they're doing what they're doing because they're out for revenge. Yeah, I'm telling you, if I had the power to to do my own thing here and to, you know, just go nuts from a fan perspective, part two would have looked much different. I mean, they would never have been in it, and you would have seen Marv like in prison, cuffed to a table, chain smoking, and talking to a therapist, and Harry would have been, I don't know, maybe in the room with him, or he would have been in the corner of the prison yard by himself. I mean, this would have been a much different movie. And like Marv is a basket case because this kid tormented him for an entire night. It's still funny, but it's not like, again, why in the world would they come after this kid knowing that he's the one, this little tiny kid got them arrested for crying out loud and stopped them. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, and then the second one, like, at the end of the movie when they finally get their hands on him after the toy store, they have a gun and he has the gun out, and it does seem like their plan is to kill him. And so it's like that's kind of a dark turn. I mean, thankfully, the bird lady saves him and whatever, and it becomes back to being a little more lighthearted, and he gets reunited with his mom, and blah blah blah. But that's pretty dark, even for like for a kids movie. Like, I don't know. What do you think about that?
It is dark. And I think there's a world in which this is a dark comedy and not just a children's movie. I go back to Elf. There's a cut of that trailer that someone did on YouTube, and it's excellent, where they've got sort of creepy music in the background, and they've cut it in such a way which suggests that he's not an elf, that he's mentally disturbed, and that he is stalking this family. It is awesome. Like, and it's completely nonsense, but the way it's cut, it's a much more different take on that film than what we saw. But I'm with you. I think that's pretty dark. And yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's not the movie that we're talking about, but I don't know. You look at anything through the eyes that you have now, and you're looking back on something from another time period or time era, or whatever. I mean, you can apply all sorts of different nuanced themes to it and different perspectives. This movie lends itself to that because it's so ridiculous. Is that why it works in all these fan theories? Because so much of this movie is just absurd.
I think so, and I think that they wanted to keep it lighthearted, but in the second one, I think maybe they threw in that like kind of dark twist of danger as like a cautionary tale to not encourage kids to steal their parents' credit cards and try to go stay at a hotel alone, like because up until that point, Kevin makes it look like it's really fun, right? He's alone. He's getting room service. He could go buy whatever he
Right.
wants. He takes in limo, that all sounds great, but then they bring back the wet bandits, and there's danger, and then Kevin literally almost gets killed. So maybe they threw that in there as like to caution kids that while it may seem all fun and games to be all on your own spending your parents' money, as a child, that there are real dangers to running off from your parents.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Not the least of which is run into a dirtbag who will one day try to destroy the country. So yeah, you've always got to worry about that possibility. I find it funny that the most iconic moment in this film, and one of the most iconic moments in any film, was completely done by accident. Because the direction to Macaulay Culkin when he's in the mirror and putting aftershave lotion on his face, the direction to him was dab it on your face as if you're patting it on with your hands, and you're screaming from the pain. Instead, he threw his hands up and kept them there because he's a kid and he's not going to follow direction. But they thought it was so funny that they left it in the film. And I'm like, now that is one of the most iconic moments of any movie of all time, but it almost never happened.
Yeah, and that's kind of became the poster for the movie,
Yes.
right? Is that image with him with his hands on his cheeks, and like the yelling. I mean, I just got my oldest an ugly Christmas sweater this year that says "Merry Christmas, you filthy animals" on it, and it has Kevin, with the hands on his cheeks. Like, so it's funny, like something so instant, like you said, so insignificant that almost didn't make it into the movie, literally has become like the face of the movie.
Face of the movie, pun intended. Um, did you think at the time when this movie came out that The Angels with Filthy Souls was an actual film that they were showing in this movie?
I did. I had nothing to like tell me otherwise. So, I just thought he was watching some old like gangster movie.
Oh, for sure. And I'm sort of an older movie kind of guy. For my money, the older black and white movies are, I don't know, they're where it's at. The style, the innocence of a lot of them, I just love them, depending on which one you're talking about, of course. But at the time, I remember thinking, I don't even think I've heard of this movie. Like, how do I not know these actors? Well, there's a good reason for that. They weren't real. I mean, it never really happened. I mean, keep the change, you filthy animals is a very highly quotable line. You know, ridiculous, but quotable. And especially when Marv he hears the movie turned up loud and the fireworks going off and all that stuff, and he goes back to the van and he's talking about snakes. He's like, I know I heard that name before, and which makes it very believable and very real. And Harry's like, snakes? I don't know no snakes. And it's so funny. But one of the best moments for me was like, let's get out of here. It's like, no, 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 no. Wait a minute. We stay. He's like, what? What are you kidding me? They're going to think we did it. He says, well, if when they come out, wouldn't it be nice to have someone to ID the cops in case we get questioned? I'm like, oh man, how can he be so smart? But then later, as you said, keep falling for the gags and keep coming back for more. It's crazy.
Well, I think he was one of those people who's smart at being a
Uh,
criminal,
right.
but he was blinded by his need to like get the kid at that point. That I mean, because at any time he could have hightailed it out of there. They could have left. Yes, Kevin might have been able to describe them, but if they had been, they could have. Kevin, they knew Kevin was home alone, right? And they knew the phone lines were down, so they weren't worried about him calling the cops. So they would have had a really good head start. They could have just cut their losses and bailed. Yes, there would have probably been a sketch out there of them, but oh well. But instead, they kept at it. They kept at it, and inevitably, that's their persistence at wanting to get Kevin is what got them, captured.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call. Um, the stunts, and we got to touch on that here because you can't talk about Home Alone without the stunts. They're insane, and they're very over the top, very cartoonish, as we said, very Wile E. Coyote. That the animal getting dropped, all the all the classic stuff in this film. They're so over the top, like the slipping and falling on the ice and going way up in the air and all this stuff. To this day in Hollywood, when you have stunts like that in your film, they're called the Home Alone stunts. So it's still sticking around, and with very good reason. Um, what is your favorite stunt in this film? What's your favorite, I guess, torture or whatever that Kevin does to these guys? Which one is the one that makes you laugh the most?
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I probably would have to say, the ones like that happen outside before they actually get into the house, because I feel like those ones like that involve like heat and the snow and slipping and all of that stuff, like they're not that like they're the funniest, but to me I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like you know all of that happens and they still want to get into the house. And I'm like,
Right.
why? Like you've already been put through so much on the outside, you should know the inside's not going to fare better for you, right? And like the amount of pain they went through before they even get into the house is just crazy to me. And I just think that like they're relatable, right? We've all been in our front yard or our backyard and trying to get in the house and slipped in a on a puddle or tripped over a hose, or not that they were booby traps set out for us, but like we've all been there, right? We're just trying to get to the front door, and there's always something. So I think the outdoor ones were my personal favorite.
I think for me, my favorite, and this one gets me they're all good, but the one that gets me every time is when Marv is walking up the steps where there's tar on the steps, and his socks are off, and he steps onto the one step, and the nail, he continues stepping on the nail, and it goes like halfway into his foot. And he stands there on the step, holds his foot all the way up to his face to scream when he's looking at it, and falls straight back. That is the funniest thing. It's like that double take of where he's screaming at it and then falls back. That gets me every
Yes.
time.
Well, and kudos to Marv for being flexible enough to pull his foot up
Right.
that high while standing on a stair.
there, and this is a very obscure reference to throw into the middle of this, but Jim Varney, the great late Jim Varney, who was Ernest P, right, or Ernest, he in Ernest Scared Stupid, again, not a very Oscar worthy film, kids, but he's facing down this troll and he's in this truck and he shifts the shift is on the column, he shifts it in the drive and he pulls his foot all the way up to slam it down the gas, and his boot comes all the way up by his face, as if to say, I'm going to put the pedal through the floor. The movie's not good at all, but it's the funniest bit. Just that over-exaggerated, I'm going to all the way up here. So every time I see that from Marv and Home Alone, I think of Ernest Scared Stupid, which is, I connect weird wires in my head sometimes. So.
No, I think that's a good connection, and it's funny, right? And impressive at the same time.
Right.
Do you feel like it was the stunts that, or I should say the traps that are set for the Wet Bandits by Kevin? Do you feel that it is believable that a child could have set all of those traps?
Ooh, great question. I love the bit when he says he's going to call the cops, and Harry goes, from a treehouse. Like in today's day and age, if there's cell phones involved, this movie doesn't happen. But no, I had to throw that in. But no, let's see. Is he capable? Can he do it? I think the simple things are very feasible, like the Legos on the carpet, the little micro machines on the carpet. That's very feasible for him. Setting up a blowtorch, the tar and the feathers with the plastic wrap and the fan. That's very achievable, I think. God, great question. The tar on the steps, maybe. The paint buckets. How did he know that they would they swing forth as much as they needed to? I mean, are they completely full? You would guess they are. The spider, why was he not scared to touch the spider? I don't know. Man, those are great questions. I mean, I'll throw it back to you. Do you think that they're believable for a 10-year-old or 9-year-old at that pace?
I mean, the Legos, yes, because I mean, gosh, if you've ever stepped on a Lego, you know that is horrible.
It's not fun.
It is the worst. Okay, so that's an easy one, right? You just dump out some Legos and you're good to go there. The other stuff, like, my question is, why does Kevin's parents have a blowtorch?
Right.
Like, I don't feel like that's a common thing you find in people's garages. I mean, maybe it is in Chicago. I don't know. But is that back to the mob ties? Is that why Dad has a blowtorch? I don't know.
Ooh.
How did he get up to tie off the strings that were used to swing the paint cans? Like, did he have to pull out a ladder and then climb up the ladder? Like, it's not. He did a lot in a very short amount of time, like a few hours. So my thing is like the time it would have taken for him to figure all this out, gather his supplies, and then set it up doesn't seem feasible to me. But again, if we're going with that fan theory that he's a little bit of a sociopath, then maybe he'd been planning this for a while and it was just a simple case of right time, right place. He already kind of had his plan set in motion.
I mean, he's such a planner and he's such a criminal master, or not criminal, but such a mastermind. Yet he makes an entire box of Kraft macaroni and cheese, sits down with his fork and his knife or whatever it was, and before he can take a bite, the clock goes off. So then he has to go do the thing for the bandits. And I'm like, he didn't take one bite. What did he even make the Kraft macaroni and cheese for? So like, he's so smart he can build all these traps, but he doesn't know what time it is.
Well, not only that, but like again, back to the theory that he's a psycho. Like the fact that he like prepared his meal and like you said, sat down with his napkin and his fork and his knife. Doesn't that kind of seem like something you would see in like a scary movie or
yes,
Criminal Minds or something? Like this killer who's doing these deplorable things, but then also does very formal dining and such. Like, like it kind of gives a little bit of credibility to that theory that Kevin's not so great.
You're leaning really hard into this Kevin is a sociopath stuff. I'm kind of liking it.
I mean, I feel like the evidence is kind of there. I mean, it does kind of seem a little dark that a kid would, like you said, or they would come up with this idea of these traps instead of just going and asking for help.
Yeah.
Call my parents, try to find my parents. Like it just doesn't track. He's so naive to believe that he's wished them away. If that's the reason why he doesn't feel like he can go for help, is because, like, I did this, I sent my, and maybe he thought he would get in trouble, right? Because they would be like, well, where are your parents? Um, but on the flip side, then, like, if he's that naive, then how is he also the same mastermind who builds these traps and isn't scared of these bandits, right? Like, I don't know. It just, there's something's not right with Kevin.
And on top of that, if you're going to put it that way, here's one. If he believes he made his parents disappear, and he said he did, if he believes he made his parents disappear, why at no point did he ever tell Harry or Marv, I made my family disappear. I can make you disappear too. Like, that maybe would have been backing up your theory about him being a sociopath, because as I say it out loud, it does sound kind of twisted.
Right. Well, and do you think he ever seems sorry that they're gone? I mean, he does at the end, right? He's happy to see them. He doesn't he like tell Santa that he wants his family, or that might be the second one. I might be blending my movies now. That he wishes to be reunited with his family for Christmas. So, does that enough? Does that enough to make us believe that he's remorseful for wishing them gone and that he's not a total psycho?
That was part one. And I love the Santa. And here, oh, okay. So, sidetrack here for a second. When the Santa is he's talking to him, and he makes this face when he says, I'd like to have my family back. You could tell this dude is thinking, what's going on with this kid? He couldn't have called a cop. He couldn't have said, hey kid, is everything okay? What do you mean you lost your family? Elaborate. Like, he never asked, but you could see on his face that he can't figure out what's going on.
Well, not only that, but like when he goes grocery shopping, like the cashier obviously knows something's up, right? This kid's in there by himself. He's pretending to be with his parents, but you don't see his parents anywhere.
Right.
But again, nobody calls the cops. When he steals the toothbrush, I mean, they send the bag boy chasing after him, but like nobody thinks that, like, it's odd that this kid just comes in and steals a toothbrush. Like, I don't know. I feel like the adults in this film really let you down.
Oh my God, all across the board. And not for nothing, a cop chases this kid in the traffic, for God's sake. Like, getting that toothbrush is more
Right?
important than, I mean, come on.
Safety. Yeah, exactly. Like there's just so many things wrong with the adults of this film. Like, nobody, the Uncle Frank, like you said, who's terrible, doesn't ever seem sad or concerned that Kevin's alone by himself with no chance of help, coming anytime soon. Like, he's more worried about his. And then here's the other thing: is like, who they not only did they, back to the theory about the dad, the Peter Mcallister being a mobster. Not only did he fly his entire family to France, he flew first class with his wife.
Right.
That could have been cheap. And then also, who flies first class but then puts your kids back in coach and then doesn't even check on them? Like, yeah. I feel like there's just a lot of problems with the adults in this film.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah, and the kids are not any better, but the adults are much worse. This whole little universe is all kinds of wacky. I feel like I don't know who the best person. You know who the best person in this entire film is? It's a tie.
Marlon.
Yeah, it's Marley or Gus Polanski. It's a tie.
Yeah, they
So yeah,
really are the only ones that don't let you down.
yeah. I mean, too many people like them in the movie. It's no longer it's no longer this movie. It's a much better movie
Right.
where people care about each other.
Well, everybody had to be crappy in order for things to play out the way they did, right? If Kevin's
Right.
parents were responsible, he never would have been home alone. If Kevin wasn't a little jerk, he wouldn't have thought of all these devious ways to make the burglars pay. He would have just ran for help, and then there would have been no movie.
Right.
So,
And speaking of jerk, when Uncle Frank says, "Look what you did, you little jerk."
oh, I know. I do feel bad for Kevin then.
Oh man, my kid's 13 now. Cause oh God, I'm so old. He's 13 now. Wrap your head around that. And I'm telling you right now, if anybody to this day looked at my kid and said, "Look what you did, you little jerk," me and that person's going to have some problems. So if my kid's
Yeah.
10, nah, no sir, you back up. Uncle Frank and I are going to step outside.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's a whole other thing as a parent too. It's when other people try to say things about your kids, like, yeah. I'm surprised that Kevin's parents, but I mean, not surprised. I mean, they left him home alone. So they're
Right.
obviously not the most loving parents. But yeah, Uncle Frank, I really just felt like he was awful.
Oh, he's the worst. He's the absolute worst. It doesn't get any worse than freaking Uncle Frank. I mean, truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. But like as you said, without all these factors playing a part, you don't get this movie. Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. Favorite Mcallister family member, not named Kevin, or can you even do that?
Um, okay, I would pick the mom just because I relate to her as a mom. Like, I wouldn't leave my kid home alone, but I relate to that like level of like it being chaos and just being exasperated and reacting out of anger sometimes instead of common sense. Like, I could relate to the mom a little bit, and I just love Catherine O'Hara. I love Schitt's Creek. Like, she's just I liked her as Kevin's mom, but I love her as Moira, and so I think I would have to pick her.
Oh, I can't pick her. She's just again, it's just the worst mother ever. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I've got one. I put the question to you, but I don't know if I've got one. To be honest with you, I would say Fuller.
Right?
Because what did
Well, I
Fuller
mean,
do? You know?
he's so cute when he gets like smashed behind the chair. The poor kid, like,
Yeah. And when she says, he'll wet the bed, and he's got that can of Pepsi, and he smiles at him.
and like raises his glass. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, does he really know what they said? Maybe he didn't hear. Maybe he was just smiling at Kevin, and he didn't mean
or
anything by it.
or he just knows like his love for Pepsi surpasses his ability to not wet the bed, and he's made his peace with it.
He knows who he is. He
He's
knows. Yeah,
comfortable with who he is,
yeah.
right?
He knows what he's about. Oh my God, that's funny. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I again, this is like the worst family ever. Um, yeah, I don't really have a love for any of them. I think the dad may be the worst one because at least she feels some remorse,
Right.
and he doesn't seem to feel anything at all. And when they get
No.
home, and he talks about he went to the store and he goes, "What a funny little guy." I'm like, "Hey, idiot. You've been without your son for how many days in a row now? Come on, man."
Yeah. The dad, yeah, he's not great, and the siblings were kind of flat for me as well. Like, I could take him or leave him. They were just kind of But I mean, that's the movie, though, right? The movie is Kevin. Kevin is the movie, so that part makes sense. What do you feel about this movie? Like, as a Christmas movie, is it one of your favorite Christmas movies? Is there another Christmas? Like, what is your favorite comedy Christmas movie? Is it Elf, or what do you think?
Um, I would say Elf. Elf is one of my favorites of all time Christmas movies for sure. I won't put it top 5 favorite movies of all time like I do It's a Wonderful Life, but it's my favorite. I'll say it's my favorite Christmas comedy for sure.
Christmas comedy. What do you think about Christmas Vacation in comparison to Home Alone? It's like similar, right? With like the slapstick kind of funny like things happening.
I love Christmas Vacation. I just watched it again the other night. I love that movie. I think it's more slapstick than Elf is. It's more physical comedy because it's Chevy Chase, obviously. I mean, Will Ferrell's great at that too, but Chevy Chase is the king of that stuff. Um, I just think they're two different movies. There's just two different things there. Elf has more heart than Home Alone and Christmas Vacation put together, for my money, for sure.
Yeah, there's heart in Christmas Vacation, right? He just wants to give his family the perfect Christmas, and
Right.
that's like his downfall. But yeah, Elf is more like heartwarming, I would say, than it's comedy, but it's equal parts heart and comedy. Whereas Home Alone and Christmas Vacation are a little more heavy with the comedy than they are the heart. But I mean, Christmas Vacation is classic. Like, how could you not love that movie?
Right. Um, so let me ask you this. How well do you think this movie ages? Does it hold up pretty well? I mean, it was 1990. I don't know how much. I mean, the whole bit with us having so much cell phone technology now and so much internet now, that dates it. But other than that, I don't know if I consider this movie dated that much.
No, I mean, like, I think it tracks because it is what it is, right? It's a '90s movie about a kid who was left alone. Would it fair? I mean, if you look at the reboot that they did on Disney Plus, like, you're gonna have to go watch this now because we've talked about it so much. I'm counting on you to go watch it.
Yes.
You know, it is an up to date version of what happens, but like, I'm thinking back, I'm trying to think because, like, again, my kid has made me watch this movie at least 10 times. Um, they don't explain why he doesn't call anyone because his phone lines aren't down, right? This kid who's left home alone.
Hmm.
And I don't think he has a cell phone himself because he's 10, but he has they have like a Google Home, but I think it's called like a Gooby or something weird. And but like, he never calls anyone either. And like, his parents are in Tokyo, so maybe like they don't have international calling on their cell phones or something, and that's why, like, but like, they don't really explain it. So I guess it does track because they made a version of it in 2021, and they don't really explain why he doesn't call anyone for help.
Wow, that's interesting because considering the modern technology we have now, I wouldn't think this movie would even make sense to make. But as we said, dollar dollar bill, y'all. So,
Yeah, well, I'm thinking
yeah,
like, I've watched it a few times, and I just now, because like we're talking about it, I just now kind of like realized that like, why doesn't he call for help? Like, he has that smart home device. His parents realized once they're in Tokyo that he didn't make it, and they don't try to call him either. So, but you know what? A lot of households nowadays don't have landlines. So maybe
ah,
he didn't have a cell phone because he's 10. So that rules that out. And if they didn't have a landline in the home, then there really is no way for the parents to call him. Although you cannot convince me that kid doesn't have an iPad or
right.
something. But yeah, they don't really address it at all. And that's kind of like sloppy movie making. Like, you would think that they could at least explain it a little bit. Now I'm gonna have to watch this movie again with my kids and try to like come at it from like an analytical point of view. I'm like, okay, where are his opportunities to call home or call for help? Um, so I mean, yeah, I guess like you said, I don't think it's realistic in this day and age. I mean, my kids have so many different devices that they can communicate on. Like, I feel like they would be able to call for help.
And Kevin didn't have a chance because not only did he not have tech, not only did he not have cell phones or internet, the cops in this town are dumb as rocks. Like, she's calling from out of the country. I mean, desperate, pleading with them to check on her son. And they're laughing at her, basically laughing at her, calling her crazy woman or whatever they call her, hyper woman or whatever. And then like the cop shows up at the door and then no one answers, like, she's crazy. Ain't nobody here. I'm leaving. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but like, Kevin Kevin doesn't know for sure that the robber trying to get into his house isn't also a cop, right?
Right.
Because he comes dressed as a cop. So, for all Kevin knows, he's a corrupt police officer. So maybe Kevin didn't feel comfortable going to the police because an officer came to his house and that officer is now trying to rob him. So maybe
You
that's the problem.
you just did more to explain this film than I think we've done in an hour and a half. That was awesome.
Right? Why couldn't I have come up with that like an hour and a half
You
ago?
could have saved us an hour and a half of speculation. That was awesome. Yeah. I have never, and I mean to tell you, I have never thought about it like that before. But that makes so much sense.
No, definitely. And I think that is like, that is it right there. Like, and that could be also why the cop comes to do the welfare check and he doesn't let him in, right? Because he thinks he's working with the robbers.
Right. Right. Yeah. See, that's great. That's really good stuff. I swear, I think we've done more work for the sake of this film than the people who did the film ever put into it. It's as is everything. When you're a fan of something, you tend to overthink and put more thought into it than maybe the people who actually created the thing to begin with. We mentioned wrestling. That seems to be true of wrestling quite a bit. And then it seems to be true of movies and Hollywood and TV and music and basically all the M's here on the show, kids. But it's how we roll. That's excellent. That's a great call. So yeah, again, I don't think this movie dates itself except for the technology bit. I asked you when we started where it ranks for you. Where do you think it goes down in general in terms of Christmas movies? Do you think 20 years from now? Because 20 years from now, we're still going to be talking about Charlie Brown and It's a Wonderful Life. Are we still going to be talking about Home Alone 20 years from now, you think?
I don't know. I don't know if it has that power to withstand the test of time. Because again, I feel like some people, it's like a classic movie from your childhood, but is it a classic Christmas movie from your childhood? Like, I feel like Charlie Brown and Christmas Vacation and Elf and those movies will be around because those are like undoubtedly Christmas movies. And but I don't know if Home Alone will be. And side note, I actually do not like It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, you couldn't have just kept that to yourself.
I feel like was called It's a Wonderful Nap is what I call that movie.
Boo.
But to be fair, everyone's got their preferences. My oldest hates Charlie Brown.
What?
Yes, I was driving and I was like, "Oh, guys, like we're gonna watch Charlie Brown Christmas," and my oldest was like, "I hate Charlie Brown." I like wanted to like slam on the brakes. I'm like, what? Excuse me? Like, how are you my child? I love Charlie Brown Christmas. I love Peanuts. Like, I'm just like, who are you? Like, how are you my child? So
he is
I guess everybody just has their preference, right?
He's the child of a woman that doesn't like It's a Wonderful Life. That's who he is.
That movie is so terrible.
My God. You need to stop while you're behind. Don't dig the hole any deeper. It's horrible.
It's horrible.
What a terrible take that is.
It's a terrible movie. It's so terrible. And like that guy is garbage. Like,
what?
Yes, he's so like his whole attitude is it's like, no wonder you're miserable, bro. Like he's just so fixated on like how terrible things are. Like, I don't know. He just is not my favorite Christmas movie. I've only seen it like twice, so maybe I need to like rewatch it with fresh eyes.
Yes, because things are terrible. Things are all terrible. I am so George Bailey because
well, that's why you love it, because you relate to him.
Everything's terrible. Everything's on fire, and it's like that all the time. And I'm just waiting for a kindly old angel sent down to say, "Hey, things aren't all that bad. Check this out," and then I'll feel better in the end. So that's all that really matters to me. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that guardian angel to show up. He just hasn't shown up yet. So maybe he'll show up in the form of Kevin Mcallister all grown up. Who knows?
Right. It's just not my movie. But again, I haven't tried to watch it in a really long time. So
right.
I might have to put it on my list of, holiday movies. I'll give it a second chance. But, like I said, I haven't seen Die Hard. I haven't seen Miracle on, was it 34th Street?
You've not seen you've not seen Die Hard?
I have not seen Die Hard. I've never seen Die Hard.
And you're on the 6M podcast. I don't know how this happened.
I'm not a pop culture. I've never seen Jaws. I've never seen Karate Kid. I've never seen Back to the Future.
Oh my God, stop. This hole is so much bigger than what it was 2 minutes ago.
I'm the worst. I haven't seen so many movies.
Oh my God in heaven. So here's what my recommendation is to you and anyone listening who's in the same boat as you. It better be a tiny boat. It better be. Go listen to the 6M podcast because we've covered a bunch of this stuff already.
Yes, I've seen. I will have to start making my way through some of these, and then I could listen to the podcast to kind of, I could relate better because I mean there are a lot of pop culture things that I am familiar with, but there are a lot of movies that I am not.
Yes. Well, I don't number the episodes in terms of number them in the episode titles themselves, but this episode will be I think this will be number 71. It will be released the week of Christmas. But yeah, you've got 70 other episodes to go dig through, so enjoy that time. And one of them you've already heard because it's you and I doing Friends. So at least you've got that much done and out of the way. Now you've only got like a whole bunch more to go, binge in your time on this planet, because it's important. Because if you've never seen Jaws, my God in heaven, and Back to the Future, oh my God.
Yeah, well, because when I was a kid, my mom worked a lot, and every Friday I got to rent a movie, and I could pick whatever movie I wanted from Blockbuster, because that was a thing back then.
Of course.
And I always picked the same two movies every weekend, and nobody ever tried to sway me to pick different movies. They just let me rent the same two movies for years, so that's probably why I never saw anything different.
I would say, well, you get a pass on that. You're a kid. No pass now because you're a grown woman. It's time to make it happen.
Okay, that's true.
Yes, for the sake of your kids.
Circling back to Home Alone and Christmas.
Yes.
Where does this rank for you out of Christmas movies? Like, if you could only watch 2 Christmas movies this holiday season, would this even be close to being one of them?
It's not one of them.
Right? It's just, what? Okay, so what would be your 2?
It's a Wonderful Life and Elf would be my 2. If I was just to 2, those are the 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you Elf. And I'm not as big of an Elf fan as a lot of people are, but it's cute. It's a cute movie.
And the original Miracle on 34th Street is so incredibly charming. All the remakes are crap. Don't waste your time. The original, black and white, is great. It's so good. It's so dated because of the references and because of the time period, and it doesn't matter because he's tremendous. It's such a good movie.
What's your favorite modern Christmas movie besides Elf? You cannot say Elf because you've already said it. Okay. What's your favorite recent Christmas? Oh, here, let me circle back. What do you think about the movie Jingle All the Way? Oh,
Schwarzenegger?
Yes.
Not a fan.
My kid loves it.
Really?
Loves it. And then I remember when WWE was like, let's make movies, and I was like, well, that's a terrible idea. Apparently they made Jingle All the Way 2 with Larry the Cable Guy, and I've been subjected to that as well, and let me tell you, it's not great either.
Boy, so here's a question for you. How low was your budget that you went from Arnold to Larry the Cable Guy?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was WWE production, so you tell me, what's Vince's budget for but yeah, what's your favorite modern, newish Christmas movie besides Elf?
Besides Elf, that's a good one. It's one, maybe it's out of left field. I love Fred Claus. Tell me you've seen Fred Claus.
Refresh my memory. I feel like I've seen it, but I'm blinking.
Paul Giamatti is Santa and Vince Vaughn is Fred. And Vince Vaughn's character is kind of a jerk. He's kind of a bum. They're brothers, and he grew up in the shadow of Santa Claus, and he has to go to the North Pole to help his brother.
Okay, yes. I have seen this.
I
do love Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, he's great, and he is. Talk about a role that's written for somebody. He's so good, and he's so good at that. There's heart and unexpected moments in that movie that get me every time I see it. In fact, I watched that again. I think it was day before yesterday I watched that because I watch Christmas movies all through the Christmas season, starting in November.
I do too, but I watch Hallmark Christmas movies. Those are my thing.
I've seen them. Listen, I spent all last week watching really crappy Christmas movies, low budget, horrible story, wretched acting. And after 2 or 3 of them, it's like, you know what? Let's just watch another one. So we did.
Were they Hallmark ones, or were they even lower budget than that?
Oh, Lifetime, BET, all horrible. There was maybe 2 that weren't so bad, and that's saying something because they were all terrible.
I love Hallmark Christmas movies. My dream is to go to a small town with a Christmas tree farm that needs saving. And but anyway, but speaking of Christmas movies, I've never seen Bad Santa, which I've heard is good.
It's good. It's funny.
I've never seen that one. I also, okay, you know what we should have done? Screw Home Alone. We should have done the Santa Claus trilogy. Tim Allen.
I gotta tell you,
If you tell me you are not a fan of those movies, I'm gonna say that it's because you like It's a Wonderful Life, and that is.
For one thing, in the time that we're living in right now, I'm not much of a Tim Allen guy because,
Okay, fair.
Yeah, he's not really a great person. On top of that, the first movie was okay. I after that I tapped out. Like, nah.
Have you seen the second and the third one?
I have, but
they're so cute.
Yeah, I maintained the first one was okay. But I tapped out after that, especially when the guy playing the elf by the third movie sounds like this. Santa, what are we going to do? Well, your voice is changing. I don't know what's going on,
I thought those movies were super cute. I like them.
Yeah.
Those are a must in our house during the holidays. We have to watch the Santa Claus movies. We watch Home Alone, and then I try to force them to watch Charlie Brown's Christmas. Oh, Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas. That is my... Linus blanket of a Christmas movie. I just love that movie.
What about the Christmas Carol movies themselves? The retelling of a Christmas Carol.
I hate all of them. I hate
really.
The original. It's a terrible story. I don't want to hear about some grumpy guy visited by a bunch of ghosts, and then all of a sudden, after he's shown repeatedly what a person he is, he's like, okay, I guess I could not be anymore. And then we're all like, yay! And that's the end of the movie. Excuse my language. Sorry. You can edit that out. That's the end of the movie. It's just garbage. The idea of Scrooge, I like that because, literally you find a grumpy person at Christmas, you're going to call him a Grinch or a Scrooge. I like it as an adjective, hate it as a movie.
Well, there's been a bunch of retellings of it. The one with George C. Scott is by far the best because he is Scrooge. He looks it. He sounds it. And George C. Scott was such an amazing actor. I love that film. There was one with the Muppet one with Michael Caine is cute. It's funny, and I love the Muppets. I get where you're coming from. I mean, does this character deserve redemption after all he's done? Talk about being visited by ghosts. If you say that It's a Wonderful Life, that you hate it, you're going to be visited by three spirits on Christmas Eve. I'm just here to tell you it's going to happen. So don't be surprised. And when it happens, think of your old buddy Tom, who warned you. You'll be like, oh my God, Tom warned me and I didn't listen.
It's just not my favorite. I'm not a big Christmas Carol fan, but you know what? I'm also not a big Nutcracker fan.
Oh, I'm not here for that.
Nutcracker is the most boring thing in the world. So I much more welcome the slapstick Christmas.
And when I was growing up, my mom adored the Nutcracker. So every time it was on TV every year, we had to watch it. And I didn't mind because it was mom and I was a kid and I didn't know any better. I wouldn't choose to watch it now because it wouldn't do anything for me now,
Yeah, I think I would probably watch It's a Wonderful Life over the Nutcracker.
Speaking of Scrooge, what about Bill Murray's Scrooged?
There's not I don't even like Scrooge McDuck as the Disney. I'm just not a fan. It's just you will not get me to be willingly let me watch any of the renditions of A Christmas Carol.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just not. We're not big on Christmas Carol in this family, or even the book. Reading the story, I'm just meh. It's just, I don't know. I just yeah, it's great. He gets redemption at the end, but he's just a jerk.
He is.
You just kind of want to leave it at that, or at least I do. He's a jerk. I hope he has a horrible Christmas, and he deserves that night of no sleep.
I mean, there's no room, there's no wiggle room here with you. You don't believe in the joy of Christmas, the magic of Christmas, the salvation that is Christmas. This is another podcast for another time, but and I'm going to say the words real quick, but it's not a real quick answer. This idea that Christmas is magic, it saves everything. We have to save Christmas. The plot of every Christmas movie is basically, Christmas is ruined. Oh no, wait. And that's every Christmas movie. That's every one of them is like that, where we have to save Christmas. Right. So
right.
It's so compelling, and we keep coming back, and every movie they make is the same movie. It's oh, well, they're going to save it. It's too late. No, it's not. They saved it. Like that's every year. What is it about that idea? Does it say something about us? Is it the industry? What is it combination? We always
Well,
come back to that.
I don't know like what Christmas is like for you guys, like, but for us, you know, Christmas for me growing up, like as a kid, was kind of like it was okay. We had presents, but like my mom worked a lot and she would stay up late into the wee hours working. And so, Christmas morning for us was like we woke up, we had to wait for mom to wake up. Then mom had to wrap our presents because she was too busy working the night before to
Wow.
wrap them.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot of work and stress on our mom. And so I, as a kid, was kind of like a Christmas cynic, right? Like, I just didn't like get into the thing. But then when I had kids, like, I got swept up in wanting to make it magical for them, right? So then I really started enjoying Christmas because I could see that magic side, but then I could also see that stress side as a parent. You just want your kid to have an amazing Christmas. And I think that is what resonates with a lot of people with these movies is that you all of their plights usually come from a place of them wanting to provide a great experience for their family or their loved ones, or they just want this time of year to be something special to them. And, in doing so, there's usually like stress involved or problems arise or something's going to threaten that. And then I feel like as people, we relate to that because we as people want to give that experience to other people and we know what it's like to fight for it or to have it not be feasible, and you're looking for this way to make it happen. And so I think a lot of people can just relate to that struggle. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, growing up, it was just me and my mom after the death of my dad. So, like, I was a little kid, and we were 10 years just me and her. And it was tough. It sucked. And she did everything she could. But to say that we had lean days is an absolute understatement. And I have turned into that old guy who tells his kid these horror stories of what it was like growing up poor. And not so poor that you're on the street. We weren't, living in a van down by the river or anything, nothing that bad, but like poor enough that there were some days where there was no food in the fridge at all. And I mean nothing. It's a bottle of ketchup, jar of mustard. That's all we had. And it's like, Christmas was, she did the best she could. It's some years it was good, some years it was okay. She would take her entire check and blow it on toys for me, which she didn't need to do, but I was her only kid and she loved me to death and wanted to give me a good Christmas. So, paying it forward now, I love doing stuff for my kid. And like, I hated Christmas as an adult, hated it, couldn't stand it, despised it. My son's born, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to be that guy anymore. So after he was born, my tree started going up on November 1st every year. And every year it goes up on November 1st for about 13 years now. And I always have people raise their eyebrows and say smart remarks to me, and it's too early and whatever. And I'm like, you know what? You do what you want to do. I'll do what I want to do because it's over too fast for me now. And like, I want to stretch it as long as I can. And my kid has never seen his dad hate Christmas. And, you know, other people can't say
Same.
that about me. It's important to me.
No, same. My kids, again, like I did not love Christmas. Like, here's the thing: when I was a kid, Christmas, like I said, I already described it to you, but my grandparents did have a really cool Christmas Eve party every year. And my grandma always got a really big tree with ornaments. And as a kid, I used to love to like lay underneath the tree, and I would look up and make up like stories about the ornaments, and she would just listen to me, talk about it she was such a good grandma. So she was, fighting cancer and other things. So the last year that she was alive, we didn't have her Christmas party because she was too sick. And I had picked out like a little Christmas mug for her. Our school had like this holiday store, where they sell overpriced crap, and you buy it. And I had bought her a mug that said like "World's Greatest Grandma," and I was so sad that I didn't get to give it to her. And she told me, it's okay. You'll give it to me the next time you see me. And of course, after the New Year, she passed away, and I never saw
Mm.
her again. And for a long time, I didn't want anything to do with a Christmas tree, right? Like, I didn't want to decorate one. I didn't want to look at one. And I was really afraid that when I had Holden, my oldest, that I was going to be so anti-Christmas. And like, how is that fair to him, right? So I just told myself, like, you got to get over it. Like, just fake it. Even if you don't care about this, And in faking it that first year with him, I just really actually fell in love with like that feeling, that warm, fuzzy feeling, the smell of the trees, all of that stuff. And so it actually turned me into a Christmas fan, like you said. So I feel like it really is plausible. It does just take a little bit of Christmas magic to get people into the spirit of things, but I still hate Scrooge, and you can't convince me otherwise.
So you found redemption, but you don't care about the story about the person that finds redemption. That's
only because I did find redemption, but I wasn't like out there kicking babies like he was practically. Okay, I was like, I'm a nice person.
Right. What's the line? If I had my way, every fool that went about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. That's pretty bad.
He sounds like a great guy.
That's kind of hard to come back from.
Scrooge would be canceled in 2021 with cancel culture. Okay, so nobody.
Oh, no kidding.
Nobody would miss him.
Yeah, when they're the guys are trying to get him to donate money, they're talking about the poor, and he's like, "Are there no poorhouses? Are there no farms? Whatever it is he calls it, And he's like, "Oh no, there's plenty of." He's like, "Well, then perhaps they should go there." And he's like, "Well, then some of them don't want to go there, and some would rather die." And he goes, "Well, if they'd rather die, perhaps they should, and decrease the surplus population."
That's you're not convincing me at all. That's here. Okay, in fact, it's the opposite.
I was going to say I'm reinforcing the notion that you have that it's a horrible story. So, yeah. Well, one day we'll visit the rest of these Christmas properties and IPs and gush about them. But I think we have gushed pretty well about Home Alone here today. So let's take this thing home and sum it up for me. What is your last word on Home Alone?
Great movie, funny movie, very nostalgic from my childhood. And a PSA, to parents out there that to please, if you're going on vacation, do the head count yourself. Do not outsource it because, all of this could have been avoided had a grown-up done the head count.
Two key takeaways that I've got here from this pod here today, kids. One is he didn't trust Harry because he thought Harry the cop, maybe all the cops were dirty. That's a good one. And number two, don't outsource the head count. I'm here for that line. That's amazing. So there you have it, kids. That's the movie. I agree with Ash. This is a classic. This is one of those movies that make you laugh. I don't know if it makes me cry, but it can tug on the heartstrings if you let it in the right moments. I think Marley has a lot to do with that. So yeah, it has its moments of those things, but for the most part, we're here for the slapstick. We're here for the comedy. We're here for Macaulay Culkin, who, as we said before, came out of this thing better than maybe he went into it, and he's a well-rounded guy now, and everything's good in his world. And for some reason, that really makes me happy. So, I think we're going to be watching this thing for years to come. I think it's possible it will hold up. We shall see. Only time will tell. In the meantime, kids, that is Home Alone. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.